Ah, the Stanley Parable. What a game. I'm just gonna be upfront and honest from the start here. I can't review this game well without spoiling it, so consider this your one and only spoiler warning. However, I personally think that even if you know nothing about this game and don't want it spoiled, you'll still have a strong desire to play it after watching this review. So I'll leave the choice of continuing or exiting out of this video up to you. You have 3 seconds to decide.
This is the story of a man named Stanley.
You know, it's funny really, the Stanley Parable is so unique, yet when you're playing it, you know you've experienced things similar to it before. See, the brilliance of the Stanley Parable isn't in the graphics or the music or even really in the gameplay itself, it's in the ability to pull you in through sheer enjoyment of just being present. You start off approaching it as you would any game. You, the player, play through and explore and have the mentality of simply progressing through and absorbing what the game has to offer, while still being separated by that ever-famous fourth wall that we all know and love and sometimes hope breaks. And as you progress, the narrator has an instant charm that you soon realize is a key primary ingredient to the enjoyment of the gameplay experience. I know most of you by now are thinking, okay, that's all fine and good, but tell us what you actually do in the game. Like, what actually happens? Fair enough, let me scratch that itch for you. To put it simply, this game is just a walking simulator in a boring office. Yep, review over. Okay, no, but seriously, it really is like a walking simulator in a boring office, but as it continues and you explore around, it begins to slowly unravel out of control. It's like when you're playing a game and all of a sudden you encounter a glitch or a game-breaking moment, and you're slightly amused for a bit, only to hit that reset button and then go back in and pretend like it never happened. But in this game, those moments are supposed to happen, and they end up being enjoyable plot points that you come to love. See, in this story, you play a man named
Stanley.
And the narrator has the power to create and modify pretty much everything around you. So it's not just his voice that makes this game interesting, although that's definitely the best part, but the story is that he's actually the one creating and providing everything around you and creates your environment. What makes this experience so enjoyable as a progression, though, is that at the beginning, you don't really know all of that about the narrator. At first, you think that you, the player, are in control. See, you control Stanley, and as you move around and interact with the environment, a boring office, the narrator simply does what narrators do best. He provides a commentary that reacts and complements your actions. He also serves as a guide that cleverly disguises instructions on how to progress in the game with storytelling. You walk down a hallway, the narrator comments on that. You enter a new area, the narrator comments on that, as well as informing you what your objectives should be and which direction to go in.
Perhaps he wanted to stop by the employee lounge first, just to admire it. Ah, yes, truly a room worth admiring. It had really been worth the detour after all, just to spend a few moments here in this immaculate, beautifully constructed room.
Pretty simple, right? I mean, you're the player after all, so you control how this game plays out, and the narrator just watches your movements and reacts. Except that's not actually this game at all. No, actually, that's where this game shines. Early on in your adventure, you're faced with 2 doors, one on the left and one on the right. But before you actually make the decision to walk through one of them, the narrator states that you enter the door on your left.
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left.
And that's when it dawns on you. The narrator isn't bound to your actions and simply responding to them. He's not a guide that's cleverly designed into the game to help urge you in the right direction to progress the game. You have a choice that can go against what the narrator is urging you to do. I've watched a lot of reviews on the Stanley Parable and also talked to people that have played it, and really, people underplay this moment in the game because when you first experience it, it's surreal. It's a moment of shock and curiosity. You have a choice to obey or disobey the narrator. But what will happen once you choose? You have control of Stanley, and you can choose to go into the right door if you wanted to. But what does that mean for the narrator? Will he bend to your changes of the script? Will he ignore you? Will the game glitch out? Or should you just go along with his instruction and enter the door on the left? It's from this point on that the game really takes off. There are 18 different endings or outcomes in this game, and they can all be triggered depending on the choices that you, Stanley, make. So the question you're faced with is, how are you going to play? You can either A, go along with everything the narrator says to do and see where it takes you, B, be rebellious and specifically disobey and do the opposite of everything the narrator says, C, venture off and explore the unknown parts of the office and this world you're placed in, or D, and this is the one you ultimately end up making, a mixture of all of the above. Okay, let's take a pause break. You still paying attention? Like, I really want you to think, did I doze off and just been watching the screen, or am I actually listening? Because this is where it gets really interesting. Look, I know what you're thinking, and you're right. Basically, every game out there nowadays lets you make different choices, so big deal, right? But what you don't realize is this game is so much better at respecting your choices. This is really where the Stanley Parable shines the brightest. In other games, you can decide to take multiple routes, or choose different dialogue options and explore free will. But let me ask you something. Have you ever been playing a game and chose an option to progress the story and afterwards realized, I don't think the developers wanted me to choose that choice? Like, the game goes on and obviously acknowledges the choice that you've made, but it's not developed well or designed well, and it's not really enjoyable, and you're like, I think they wanted me to pick that other option. They clearly sunk a lot more time and effort into the other routes you're supposed to take as a character. Like, you know those old choose your own adventure books where you'd be reading and reading and reading, and then you'd come to a point in the story where you had to choose what to do, like go down the left or the right hallway, or chase after the mysterious stranger, or make a run for it, or grab the knife, or grab the gun. That kind of escalated quickly. Anyway, I loved those books as a kid, but sometimes you'd make a choice and then you would turn to that corresponding page it told you to, and it'd be a huge disappointment. Like if I had to choose between a knife or a gun, sometimes I would pick the gun because really that's the obvious choice, right? And then you'd pick it up and then it'd be like, you fire but no bullets come out and the killer kills you, now you're dead. Well, that's a freaking letdown. And you'd realize, no. There's clearly specific choices I'm supposed to make to get to this desired ending that the authors had for me. And so the more I think about it, those books shouldn't be called Choose Your Own Adventure. They should be called Don't Choose Wrong, or Can You Pick the Correct Ending? And that's how a lot of video games nowadays are. You can make different choices that change the story, but there's clearly a correct route you're supposed to take. But in the Stanley Parable, every choice has a rewarding outcome or ending. Even the short endings are entertaining and you don't feel duped out or that you made a mistake. At least I didn't.
I realize that investing your trust in someone else can be difficult, but the fact is that the story has been about nothing but you all this time. There's someone you've been neglecting, Stanley. But in his eagerness to prove that he is in control of the story and no one gets to tell him what to do, Stanley leapt from the platform and plunged to his death. Good job, Stanley. Everyone thinks you are very powerful.
It's interesting. The Stanley Parable knows exactly what it is, but it's tough to describe to other people once you've experienced it. Freedom of choice, breaking the fourth wall, Easter eggs, and self-awareness are nothing new in games nowadays, but the Stanley Parable just does it so much better than any other game. In fact, it's so good at it that just to add a cherry on top of its performance, they decided to have a narrator that not only has a charming, pleasing voice, but also give the narrator an amazing sense of humor.
Cut the music, go back and look at that fern. Stanley, this fern will be very important later in the story. Make sure you study it closely and remember it carefully. You won't want to miss anything.
Seriously, your motivation to explore and interact with things in this game is 40% curiosity of how the game will change and break and adapt, but 60% anticipation in how the narrator will gift you with a witty, clever remark to your action or what's happening in the game because of it. The game is so good at this that I got excited to enter into a broom closet with nothing in it. Seriously, I'm not kidding.
Oh, no, not again. I won't be part of this. I'm not going to encourage you. I'm not going to say anything at all. I'm just going to be patient and wait for you to finish whatever it is you enjoy doing so much in this room. Please take your time.
The amount of absurd secrets and detail in this game is insane. For instance, there's like this mini game the narrator puts you in after being frustrated that you don't seem to like the game he's created for you. So you have to press this button in order to stop a baby, it's not a real baby, it's like a cardboard cutout, from burning in a fire. And every time you press this button, it makes an annoying buzz. And you have to do this for 4 hours straight in order to win and stop this baby from dying. The baby's also crying the entire time, which makes things a lot worse. Halfway through, 2 hours in, a second button is added. Now, obviously, nobody's gonna sit there for 4 straight hours pressing buttons and listening to annoying sounds, but people have automated this process to see what happens if you actually go through with it, and sure enough, the developers put in an ending. Upon completing this minigame, you are transported to another dimension, where you meet what can only be assumed is a higher being. I can't make this crap up. From teases of different well-known games to Stanley's version of heaven, to a museum filled with exhibits of Stanley's existence in the office, to imagining he's in an apartment with the love of his life, to the basement of the office, to space and an invitation to suicide, to an overall power shutoff room that either ends the game or takes you to freedom, to a mind control facility, to a broom closet. Look, if you haven't played the game, you probably don't believe me, but you gotta get into this. There's so many cool endings to discover. This is a difficult game to review, but it's bloody brilliant and it needs to be played by everyone. It has next to 0 difficulty and it's a really fun experience. The narrator will have you smiling the entire time, and I honestly am just thrilled that I got to avoid spoilers for so long and enter into this game fresh with 0 idea of what to expect. Look, if you have yet to play this game, I'm sorry that I've somewhat spoiled it for you, but I can still guarantee that once you play it, you'll discover that it's filled with more surprises that I haven't even covered in this video, and you will not regret purchasing it. I'm giving the Stanley Parable a 7.5 out of 10. It's not a perfect game, obviously, because it doesn't really include a lot of different gameplay mechanics or anything like that, but this is still a really high score, and it deserves it because this game is absolutely brilliant. It's funny, it's clever, it's inviting, it's entertaining, it makes you think, and it's not that long, but you'll find yourself playing it for as long as you possibly can, trying to squeeze out every little possible outcome that you can. The last thing I'll say about this game should sell you on it, and if it doesn't, I don't know how to help. All of this high praise is coming from a casual gamer who doesn't really enjoy open world games. Not because they're not good, but because they purposely don't respect your time. But this game makes discovery enjoyable. This is a game where if fast travel was included in it, I would never use it, because I would want to hear what the narrator says about me simply walking down a path and kicking a pebble along the way or something. I could go on for hours, but this video is already long enough, so I'll just stop right there. If you haven't played the Stanley Parable, I highly encourage you to, and if you have played it, let me know what you thought of it down in the comments. And lastly, I just want to thank you all so much for watching, and hopefully it will be soon when I see you in the next video. Alright, it's time for me to turn my mic off, but I'm going to leave you guys with 2 clips of some of my favorite parts of the game. And lastly, I've heard a lot of people talk about how it says the end is never in this game, but I really like the loading screen. It says the end is never, the end is never, the end is loading, the end is never. And that has reigned so true in this game. I hope you guys pick it up and you explore every single ending possible. Thanks for watching.
Now listen carefully, this is important. Stanley walked through the red door. Aha, perhaps you misunderstood. Stanley walked through the red door. I still don't think we're communicating properly. Stanley walked through the red door. All right, fine, go ahead, Stanley. You want to know so badly what's out there? You want to find out what lies at the end of this road you've chosen? Well, don't let me stop you. You see? There's nothing here. I haven't even finished building this section of the map, because you were never supposed to be here in the first place. Broken rooms, exposed developer textures. Is this what you had wanted? Was it worth ruining the entire story I had written out specifically for you? Do you not think I put a lot of time into that? Because I did. And in the end, it was all for nothing. Because this is what you wanted to see. Help me here, Stanley. Help elucidate these strange and unknowable desires of yours. What would have made this game better? What did you want to see? Vehicles? Skill trees? Work with me. You've given me absolutely nothing so far. Tell you what. Let me take a stab in the dark at a new design, and you can give me some feedback. There we go. A third option. This already feels leaps ahead of where we were before. Go ahead, Stanley. You're not Stanley. You're a real person. I can't believe I was so mistaken. This is why you've been able to make correct and incorrect choices. And to think I've been letting you run around in this game for so long. If you'd made any more wrong choices, you might have negated it entirely. It's as though you completely ignored even the most basic safety protocol for real-world decision-making. Or did you not grasp the severity of the situation? Well, I won't have that kind of risk on my watch. I'm going to stop the game for a moment so we can educate you properly on safe decision-making in the real world. Please observe this helpful instructional video.
Choice. It's the best part of being a real person, but if used incorrectly can also be the most dangerous. For example, in this scenario, a hypothetical real person named Stephen has a choice. He could spend years helping improve the quality of life for citizens of impoverished third world nations. Or he could systematically set fire to every orphan living in a 30-kilometer radius of his house. Which choice would you make? Remember that unlike here, the real world makes sense, and at no time should you make a choice that does not conform to rational logic. If you find yourself speaking with a person who does not make sense, in all likelihood, that person is not real. Allow the person to finish their thought, then provide an excuse why you cannot continue talking. Turn to a partner and practice saying, "My goodness, is it 4:30? I'm supposed to be having a back, sack, and crack." Excellent. Making choices on a regular basis is the best part to a healthy decision-making process. Most medical professionals recommend making at least 8 choices per day. Do you make more than 8? Less? And finally, if you begin to wonder if your choices are actually meaningful and whether you'll ever make a significant contribution to the world, just remember that in the vast infiniteness of space, your thoughts and problems are materially insignificant, and the feeling should subside. At this time, your instructor will guide you in an exercise to test and reinforce the material covered in this video.
Welcome back. You may have noticed that this room has begun to deteriorate as a result of narrative contradiction. But not to worry. Now that you're properly informed on good decision-making, we're going to revisit a choice you made just a few minutes ago and see what the correct thing to do would have been.